Hi, you guys. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Kim from KDUK. We are, as I'm sure some of you have seen, going to be partnering very close with KDUK over the next couple of years. And Kim, who's one of the trustees, has very kindly volunteered some time to introduce the charity, the amazing work that they're doing, and really what the partnership between Titus and KD-UK might look like. So Kim, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. To start with, it'd be really good just to learn a bit more about you as a person, your history, what you're up to, and then we'll touch on the work that we're looking to do together, if that's okay.
That's absolutely fine. Thanks, Luke. I have a very diverse background. I started my working life as a Navy helicopter pilot. I went on to become a naval ship captain, and I left the Royal Navy at the end of the last millennium, purely and simply to try and earn some money in time for my retirement. So I became a house builder. I thought there must be some money in property somewhere. And I built up a property business. And then finally I sold that business in 2014, actually due to the onset of Kennedy disease. And now work as a non-exec director, predominantly in the property sectors. So a very diverse background for me, but a long way away from KD, really.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. So you mentioned there that you'd kind of stopped in 2014, but I'd read on the KDUK website you were diagnosed in 2018, I think. Is that right? That
is correct. I was diagnosed in 2018, very late, because I'm now 64. So I was 62 when I was diagnosed. But I'd actually had the symptoms of Kennedy disease since I was about 40 years old. So it goes back a really, really long way. And one of the rare things about this disease is it is very badly diagnosed, because an awful lot of, certainly general practitioners, and dare I say it, quite a lot of neurologists don't know anything about it. So I was misdiagnosed with the problems I was having for over 20 years, which is a bit alarming.
Yeah, definitely. And do you mind if I ask, was there any kind of history of diagnosis of the disease in the family, or were you the first?
Well, the answer to that is no, because it would have come through my mother's side of the family. My mother's mother was Australian, and all of that family are in Australia, because it would go through the female line, this illness. And I haven't had any contact at any point in my life with my Australian relations.
Right. Okay.
So it's quite possible it's endemic within the family. But actually, as far as I was concerned, I knew no history of the illness before I finally got a diagnosis.
Yeah, I think that was fortunate is probably the wrong word, but that was one of the things that perhaps I was a little bit fortunate about in terms of diagnosis, that I knew my granddad had it. I knew the potential for my mum to be a carrier, and there were a lot of signs to point that I had it as well. So actually diagnosis was relatively straightforward for me. I managed to see my granddad's doctor, and he talked me through the whole process and really completed it pretty swiftly. So yeah, that's it was, I guess, a little bit easier for me. So again, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit more about the disease itself. Perhaps touch a bit on the science of the disease, who's affected, who it impacts, and what that impact looks like, if that's all right.
Sure. I mean, the disease is a genetically transmitted disease, as it were. It passes through the female line, and it's due to a fault in the androgen receptor gene. And it's to do with the number of CAG or CAG repeats within the androgen receptor gene. A normal person has 36 or less CAG repeats, and a Kennedy disease sufferer has more than 36 CAG repeats. And it can be very simply diagnosed by a DNA test. So they can take a sample and can tell you categorically whether you've got more than 36 CAG repeats, and therefore if you are a sufferer of Kennedy disease. It manifests itself in any number of ways. A lot of the symptoms are very similar to motor neuron disease in its early stages. But unlike motor neuron disease, most people outlive Kennedy's disease, whereas with motor neuron disease, unfortunately, many don't. So it's a much more slowly progressive illness. But the symptoms typically start for most people with muscle cramps, is a very common early symptom. Most people get lower limb weakness, i.e. very weak legs. I certainly was probably one of my early symptoms, and I kept on falling over. It can then progress into the bulbar region, which is your throat and mouth region, and start impacting on swallowing, coughing, chewing, and things like that. And it can also get into the upper arms in its slightly later stages. How much somebody's going to be disabled by the illness in its later stages is, I believe, still very difficult to predict. There are no good ways of predicting the rate of onset of the disease. And some of the research that's going on at the moment is trying to find markers to allow people to measure the progression of the disease. But it's fair to say everyone is impacted to some significant effect by the time they get into their later years, but some more than others. Some are lucky, some are less lucky.
Yeah, definitely. So if you don't mind, again, it'd be good to go back to your kind of 40s, where you mentioned you started noticing some symptoms, and again, to understand what they were and how they might have impacted your life. And then again, as long as you're comfortable with it, just talking through to where you're up to now with the disease, if that's okay.
Sure. I mean, I suppose in my very early 40s, I first really noticed Kennedy. I was getting some muscle cramps, but they weren't. But I really first noticed it, but dare I say it, on the ski slopes. I go skiing and I just didn't have the energy to ski for more than a couple of hours. The legs just got weak, and they actually just turned to rubber after a couple of hours. Right. And I was then playing a friendly game of cricket, very friendly game of cricket, because I'm not really a cricketer, but I couldn't run between the wickets. And that was when I was about 42. And that gave me a real shock. I just physically could not run between the wickets at all. And then it just sort of slowly progressed, and I would be going to building sites as a house builder and tripping over things, and it actually became a bit of a standing joke in the company. Oh my God, the boss is here, he's fallen over again. And it never really occurred to me what was actually happening. And that just got sort of slowly and steadily worse as time went by. And then eventually I've ended up with numb feet. I've got completely numb feet now. Right. Numb tips to my fingers. And that's really what took me to the neurologist. And I kept on getting back from my local neurologist that I had some asymptomatic illness, and he really couldn't get to the bottom of it. So I took myself then off to London, and fortunately got to go and see the right doctor at Queen Square. And when I got in front of the right doctor, it got diagnosed in about 5 minutes. Yeah. It was quite funny, actually, because I turned up at this particular doctor in Queen Square, professor of medicine there, and he looked at me, read my history, and he said, "Stick your tongue out." So I stuck my tongue out, and he said, "I think you've got Kennedy's disease." And of course, Kennedy's disease sufferers tend to have a slightly wasted tongue. Yeah. And that was then confirmed by genetics. So it's interesting that when I look back, I'd had it for so long. Yeah. How misdiagnosed it had been. I must have seen a neurologist half a dozen times and just not been diagnosed.
Yeah, okay. And I think that's one of the things that, so I, like I said, I was diagnosed, I think in 2016. We as a family were pretty confident I had the disease. Like I say, my granddad had it. I was showing symptoms such as kind of tremors in my hands, cramps, pretty irregular cramps, but like nothing stopping me doing anything day to day. And I think that's from a personal point of view, that's one of the things that I struggle with is day to day I'm fine. You know, I think one of the things that one of the ways it affects me is fatigue. I can get pretty tired pretty quickly. I've got a 4-month-old baby at home, which doesn't help that. Yeah, I can get pretty tired pretty quickly. But other than that, like day to day, I'm absolutely fine. But it's kind of the mental side of it that's been the biggest battle at the moment. And talking to you and hearing your story about being in your early 40s, that's less than 10 years away from me. To not being able to run between wickets is pretty terrifying thought. So what about day to day now then, Kim? Like, what does day to day look like for you?
Well, I mean, as I say, I sold my business in 2014, stayed with it for a couple of years, and then retired, partly because of the fatigue, and in fact, probably largely because of the fatigue, and having the stamina to do things that I wanted to do. So I now have complete control over my life. And so I do actually dictate when I do and when I don't do things, and when I have meetings, how many meetings I'll do. And that way I kind of manage it. I mean, is this illness debilitating? Of course it is. It's hugely debilitating. Am I unoptimistic about a future? The answer is no, I'm not, because I'm a great believer. You've got what you've got and you make the best of what you've got. And you adjust your life to accommodate it, and you do what you can and you don't do what you can't do. I'm also very enthused about some of the research that's going on. I'm not sure if that research will necessarily help me much, but Luke, you know, you're a youngster, it will definitely help you, and it will certainly help my grandchildren. So that the charity's doing, even more important. So the answer is it does control my life to a fairly large degree. I've got a very supportive wife. I've adjusted my lifestyle. I'm about to put a lift into my house. I'm lucky I've got a big enough house that I can put a lift into it without having to move home. So I can make the adjustments that are necessary to accommodate the illness, but not let it completely rule me.
Amazing. Yes, it's so good to hear that. It's the kind of positive outlook and adjustments you've made are. I don't necessarily class myself as a youngster, but for somebody like me to hear is really, it's really important actually. And I think that kind of leads us really nicely on to KD-UK. And again, it'd be good to hear from you just a bit more about the kind of work that you're doing, the kind of fundraising you're doing, and where those funds are going and how those funds are being spent, and again, what impact they're having.
Let me first tell you, because it's a good story, how I engaged with KD-UK. When I got diagnosed, I thought, probably like you thought when you got diagnosed, I better find out what support groups there are out there.
Yeah.
So I hit Google, as one does, and up came KD-UK. And then quite extraordinarily, given that this is a rare disease, quite extraordinarily, it transpired that the charity's chair and founder lived about 1.5 miles away from where I live, down in Dorset. So I looked into that a bit more detail, rang him, and even more extraordinary was it transpired that he was another Navy pilot, exactly as I was. So it was a massive sort of serious coincidences that occurred. And the charity was set up some years ago by Frank and Kate Hobbs. Frank is the guy I'm referring to. He is also a KD sufferer and has it in his family. And it was set up specifically to raise funds to support the research program and to support the immediate care of KD sufferers. And the charity got established quite quickly with some support from non-KD sufferers as well, I might add. And the charity is now well established, and it is already given well over £100,000 to KD research program. And it's also been funding a KD support nurse. It's a rather, the title probably doesn't do him justice. He's a very key character at the KD clinic, which is run out of the National Neurological Hospital. And Luca, is the first point of contact for all KD sufferers into the National Neurological Hospital specialist KD clinic. So the charity has been supporting him through, and will be continuing to support him going forward. So absolutely key. The research program into KD is, I think, now getting to a particularly interesting point. When we developed the ability in the world to actually read DNA, that unlocked a huge number of secrets into some of these rare genetic diseases. And it also opened up huge avenues of research into finding cures for them. I'm not an expert on KD research. I go to the KD conferences and don't always understand all that is being said. I think doctors speak in a language of their own. But suffice it to say that some of the research lines now to do with genetic modification and things like that are looking extremely interesting. Mm. And from the latest KD conference, we had a joint conference between the American Association, the KDA, and the British Association, the KDUK, just a few weeks ago. The researchers are very confident by 2022, we may be in a position to start looking at treatments, real meaningful treatments into this illness, which will either stop it, slow it, or even partially reverse it. So all they need now is the funding to see that research through to its conclusion. And that's where both the American Association, the KDA, and the British charity KDUK can really, really help. So very exciting times, because there is some light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm in absolutely no doubt, and the reason I throw some enthusiasm at this, I'm in absolutely no doubt that what our generation can do now can really rid this disease for future generations. So it's work which is very needed and very valuable.
Amazing.
And things we're doing, which I think was another part of your question, Luca, is we're doing what we can. We've been slightly stymied in 2020 by the dreaded COVID. And as I'm sure we can all absolutely understand, charitable funding has all but dried up this year. But we very much hope with a COVID vaccine over the horizon, there's a real chance that might free up next year. And we'll get back to the many things we do, and they include, ambitious bike rides. I'm organizing a road trip from San Francisco to Rome in a Citroen 2CV.
I'm very interested in that.
Which is a really exciting plan, which is getting quite well advanced. We've got the car now, it's been rebuilt, a charitable donation from some very kind ex-business colleague of mine. And we're just putting together the final details of the planning for the trip in 2022, by which time we'll hopefully be able to raise the charitable funding we need. We've also got an online donation program, and people who are happy to give a little bit a month, £5 a month, it doesn't really matter, £10 a month, if you really want £1,000 a month, but that might be wishful thinking. But those regular donations, which are a really good underpinning of the charity, and they're really valuable to us. And of course, now we've got this relationship, Luke, with Titus, and that's really exciting, because we really would like to grow our corporate links to try and get more Luke Tillotsons of this world and his teams supporting this charity going forward. But the only other point I think I really want to make is it's an extremely efficient charity. It's entirely run by volunteers. Nobody is paid. The overhead is minuscule. So any monies we get into this charity really does end up either in the research program, or it ends up funding the treatment center at the National Neurological Hospital to support patients. So the money really does get put to good use.
Amazing. And I can say firsthand as well, I've met Luca 2 or 3 times. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, but the chats I have with him are just amazing, and he makes me feel very welcome. And then we spend about an hour just taking the mick out of each other and winding each other up. And
that's very easy with Luca.
The work he does is brilliant. Yeah, it's just is amazing, because it's not, it's like it's not always the most positive experience. It's I think the outcomes are really positive, but I don't know about you, but whenever I go down to the centre, I get really fatigued. And I find the whole process quite difficult, really. But he makes it so much better. And the 2CV as well. So I think I've told you this before, but my granddad, who obviously was a KD sufferer, he came from the south of France and moved to the north of England many years ago. And he used to take himself, my grandma, and their 4 kids down to the south of France every summer in a 2CV, driving 1,000 odd miles. to go and lay on the beach in Saint-Tropez. So yeah, the two CVs, something I'm very, very interested in. I'd love to get involved in that.
Luca, you can relive the experience and jump in it for some of the legs with pleasure.
I'd love that.
It's quite funny you touch on Luca. It's a slightly odd thing, really, but the KD clinic in London is run almost entirely by Italians. It's a bit like arriving in Naples, you know. But that's where a lot of the research into KD has been led from, is from Italy. And my gosh, they're brilliant doctors. They're a really exciting team. So
one thing it'd be really interesting to hear a bit more about, Kim, is we've mentioned that we've set ourselves an ambitious fundraising target. Just how might KD-UK invest that money and spend that money?
We would anticipate that any money raised by Titus will go directly into the University College London research programme, which is being run out of Oxford, out of a clinic in Oxford. Interestingly, the same clinic building as they are running the Oxford vaccine from. So the money will go directly into the research programme, and it's one of the leading research programmes in the world at finding a cure for KD, and certainly got some of the most promising results today.
Amazing. And I think that, for us, obviously there's a personal element to this in that I'm a KD sufferer, but I think any kind of charity partner that we decided to work with, we really wanted to be impactful. We wanted to make a genuine difference. And from everything you've said to me today and previously, it sounds like we've got a real opportunity to make a difference, which is really exciting to all of us here.
I think you've unquestionably got a chance to make a difference. And as I said earlier, I think there's every chance, Luke, that it might actually make a difference in time for you to get some of the real benefits from this. I think you're young enough. Definitely the case. So let's all keep our fingers crossed.
Keep our fingers crossed, yeah, definitely. And then I guess the kind of last thing for me really, just to highlight to anybody that's watching, we as a team have set ourselves I think a really ambitious but achievable target over the next 2 years of the funds that we want to raise. That is an internal target, but we'll keep sharing with people what we're doing. We've got some really big ideas already. Like you just mentioned there, Kim, we are somewhat restrained, I guess, in terms of what's going on globally and the global pandemic. And, we want to get out, we want to challenge ourselves. As a team and as a business, we are naturally quite competitive. So we want to do some competitive challenges. I personally, I want to push myself physically as much as is safe to do so. To be quite honest with you, I want to test myself a little bit. So there'll be some physical challenges, definitely. We've spoken about, we've got an amazing network of partners, of clients that we work with, who we want to get involved in this journey as much as possible. We've spoken about the ideas of things like charity balls. So we've got loads of ideas, and we're just really excited to be partnering with you guys, and look forward to the next couple of years and what it might bring.
Well, I'm really pleased to hear that, Luke. And, we massively value the relationship with Titus, because you're bringing energy to the process, which it really, really does need, which is fantastic. And we'll continue to work with you, and we look forward to supporting Titus in their fundraising objectives. It's not easy raising funds. In some ways, it's less easy for a rare illness than it might be for some of the more common illnesses. But I would just make one point, which I think is interesting. There's some research going on at the moment. I don't think they're in the position to publish the detail, but there's research going on at the moment to say that perhaps that KD is much more endemic in the community than people realize. And it's just being horribly misdiagnosed. So it may be that there's an awful lot more sufferers of this illness, needless sufferers of this illness, out there than there needs to be, than we know about, should I say. And raising awareness of KD to the world might actually make people consider investigating KD as a possible cause of people's problems, who at the moment are just suffering in silence.
Yeah.
So, the more and more we get the message out that KD is a real and unpleasant disease which needs to be resolved, or we need to find a cure for, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Well, Kim, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great to speak, great to catch up as always, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.
I look forward to it too.